Hey,
Whoa.
we get to do another coaching corner.
Hooray, I love it.
So, today we decided on personal responsibility.
Yes.
Tell me your thoughts.
Oh my gosh. I love the topic of personal responsibility because I get like so many people just don't want to take responsibility for anything of their own. Their thoughts, their feelings, their actions, their belongings. I live in a house with a lot of people. So,
Right? Whose is this? Who did this? There's a lot of
here.
it wasn't me and I don't know,
Right.
except when every single person is saying it, somebody's not owning up.
Right. Yes.
Um,
How do you feel about personal responsibility?
I find that it's this like I don't know, catch 22 where everybody else is supposed to be responsible for themselves. Like this is the mentality of like you're supposed to take responsibility for this and you're supposed to this is your fault. You did this, blah blah blah. But then nobody is taking responsibility for anything. So it's like this two sides of the same coin, this catch 22 where nobody's responsible but everybody is responsible. And it's like, well, how do you figure it out? How do you know? Because if you grew up in an environment where nothing was your fault, or even if it was like everything was your fault, what are you learning? You're still learning to blame other people. If you're being blamed for something and you know you didn't do it, you're learning that it's okay to blame people for things, even if they didn't do it.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah. I
it's
think, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say it's a rough thing to figure out.
Yeah. I think like personal responsibility, like in relation to ADHD, the first thing that comes to mind is like time blindness, which ties into what we talked about last week or 2 weeks ago, which with awareness, like time blindness is a real thing that people with ADHD struggle with. And
Right.
once you are aware that this is something that you struggle with, then I think it's your job to take responsibility for it. And like maybe you can't avoid the fact that you're going to be late, but you can text somebody and be like, hey, I lost track of time, or I didn't allot enough time for this. I'm running late, and let them know in advance. But so many people are afraid to take responsibility and to own their shit. They would rather, what else can I blame this on? Like, what
Hmm.
third party, something out of my control? How can I shift this? And I mean, I get that. I spent years doing that. That's like our go-to because like we don't want to feel bad about ourselves. We don't want people to feel bad about us. But one thing that I have realized as an adult is like when people do take personal responsibility for their actions, their words, whatever it is, like I have a lot more respect for them
Hmm.
because
Yes.
I'm like, yes, you're just human and you fucked up in some way, whether it's something tiny or something big, and like you're willing to own it. You're not trying to shift the blame and responsibility to somebody else.
And also too that builds trust because if I'm seeing you take ownership of something that has nothing to do with me, I know that like if you hurt me or do something otherwise damaging that affects me, I can trust you to take ownership for that. I don't
Yes.
have to worry that you're going to blame it on me or shift it.
Yeah.
I actually keep a thing on one of my questionnaires for new clients all about personal responsibility.
Hmm.
And it's this little infographic and it's like this is my responsibility and this is not my responsibility. So it clearly delineates what you're responsible for and what you're not responsible for. And I ask people, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how well do you think you do at this? And usually it's not terribly high because so much of our life, all we've ever seen is responsibility being passed around like fucking hot potato. Like, no, it's not mine, not mine either. And um a lot of like in relationships, you made me feel this way, or you did this to me, or
Mhm.
this is your fault when it's not necessarily exclusively or at all somebody else's responsibility, but that's all we've ever seen. That's all we've ever known. So that's what we do too.
Yeah.
So this wheel, what is your responsibility is your words, behavior, actions, efforts, mistakes, ideas, and consequences of your actions. And then inversely, those things are other people's responsibility in regards to
Is
themselves.
this an image on your computer that you're looking at?
Yes.
Are you
If I
able
do
to
have,
share the screen?
I think I can.
Okay.
I can try. Like,
Because I'm like, how many people watching this have ADHD and stopped listening after the first two things you said?
right?
Because I can't see it. Or maybe that's just me because I'm not an auditory learner, which you and I have talked about so many times.
Okay. Oh, yay. I did it. I found it out. I haven't done this on this before, and it was a fail the first time.
Ooh, it looks like it's working.
Yeah.
Great.
So, and I like using the 1 through 10 scale because it leaves a lot more room for nuance. Because I always struggle when the scale is 1 through 5. I'm like, well, it's more than 3, but it's not quite 4. So I like to have.
So interesting though. I'm looking at this is not my responsibility.
Mhm.
And what's not on there is other people's feelings or other people's reactions.
So yes, I absolutely agree with that. Eventually someday, and maybe with the help of my graphic designer, I do hope to have a better one. But I borrowed this one from the internet.
Yeah.
From
Well, this is a great one, but I was like, oh, one of the other topics we want to talk about is people pleasing
right.
and worrying about how other people are going to react and what their feelings are.
I mean, not so directly. The beliefs and opinions is a little bit covered under that.
Yeah.
But I definitely think there's room for having a better wheel, a better delineation. That's one of the things that I most often have to tell people. And it's literally a mantra that I use and give out is that their feelings are not my responsibility.
That is so hard.
So
Right.
really hard. All right. I'm going to unshare this, I think. Hey, look at that.
Look at that.
I learned a new skill. Woohoo! So yeah, it's
Okay, so that go ahead.
I was just gonna say because it's a really hard thing to figure out. One, because we don't have any fucking practice with it, and
Mhm.
two, we presumably care about most of the people that we're interacting with and how they feel. So it's
That's our
really hard
ideal.
to separate. Like, well, shit. I mean, this is my fault. I need to make this go away. When that's not always the case.
Yeah. So thinking about like I don't want to step too much into people pleasing because that's its own topic, but like that's another thing with personal responsibility is like if we know or suspect that like a certain situation has the potential to like go a certain way or impact us a certain way, then like it is our personal responsibility to think about that in advance and be like, okay, well, like what can I do if I know that this is going to happen? What can I do on my end to make sure I'm taking care of myself? Like what boundaries do I need to set? Like what, you know, what kind of plan do I need to put into like have in place that I could activate if I start to get activated?
Mm-hmm.
Rather than saying, oh, well, this conversation triggered me and that's your fault.
Mm-hmm. I'm really good at like big picture and anticipating how things are going to go. Very rarely am I caught off guard. It happens, but very rarely. And one of the things that I like to do is I like to basically give a play by play of what I expect to happen. So, like, if I'm bringing up something to one of my partners and I know that they are likely going to have an emotional reaction to it, and I know that, you know, they're likely going to start feeling bad and start beating themselves up or whatever. I like to use verbiage that clearly states that I accept this is likely to happen, but I'm also not asking you to take responsibility for something that's not yours. Like, just because I'm stating out my feelings just because I feel a certain way about something doesn't mean that you did anything wrong. And that's kind of what happens a lot is if there's bad feelings in there, somebody has to be wrong, but that's not necessarily the case.
Right. Right. That is such a big one. Like when people start to feel bad immediately, whose fault is it? Who is to blame for this?
Right.
That we have different thoughts, opinions, ideas that are bringing up feelings.
Hmm. And
Wow.
it's just like, so actually, the thing that we were talking about earlier is the perfect example. So I was out with my partner and I was in a good mood. I was all bubbly and happy and like, I had a lot to say about a lot of different things and a lot of stories to share. And they were just kind of neutral. They weren't like in a bad mood or whatever, but they weren't also happy and bubbly. And I recognized that I was starting to have feelings about the fact that they were not matching my enthusiasm. And that's not reasonable. We can't always expect people to match our enthusiasm. So I had a choice to make. It was my responsibility to decide how I wanted to proceed. And I decided that I was just going to keep going with the momentum of my enthusiasm until it wasn't there anymore. And that's what I did. So then when I got quieter because it no longer felt good to be enthusiastic despite their neutrality, they noticed. And I was like, yeah, but that doesn't mean that you did anything wrong because it was my choice to decide, do I want to continue being enthusiastic and not getting the reaction that I think I should be getting, that I assumed that I would be getting? Or do I just want to rein it in and, save it for later, save it for when the enthusiasm can be matched? And I was
Yeah.
like, but that doesn't make you wrong. You
Right.
didn't do anything wrong for not being in the same mood that I am.
Right. And I think that's another area where like awareness comes in. You were aware of like, hey, this is happening right now and I'm having these feelings. There's nothing wrong with me having these feelings, but that also doesn't mean that anybody else needs to change what they're doing to accommodate my feelings.
And it didn't make me wrong either. That's the thing I would have done in the past. I would have been like, oh, they're bored with me. Oh, they don't like me. Oh, I'm, not
Mhm.
entertaining enough. I would have made it wrong with me too. So like in the past, I would have made us both wrong and both responsible. But like, how
That
does
would have
that
been
even
a fun
work?
night.
So, yeah. But I
Yeah.
mean, I think that's a great example of taking responsibility of your choices. And
Mhm.
like, we have so many more choices than we think we do. But once you start factoring in personal responsibility correctly, your choices become more clear. Your options and the way you can handle things becomes much more clear and much easier to follow through on. Clearly, I have a lot to say about this because I feel like now I'm dominating the conversation.
No, I feel like you're doing great. I started out strong. Ebb and flow.
Yes. But that's why we do this because we're so good at this. Like,
Exactly. And I'm loving like as we have these conversations, and like for those of you watching, like we have a list of topics. We're like, oh, what are some things that we think we want to talk about that, can relate to people with ADHD as well as just general personal growth and development. And so we have this list. And like I love that each time we bring up a topic, we're like, oh, but it also ties into this topic and this topic because it's all connected.
yes. That's like the big thing. That's been my big struggle with my own business is like trying to make it clear that these are separate topics that need to be dealt with in separate ways, but also they all go together. And that's why I like my braid metaphor. They just
Yes, they're separate topics and you need to focus on each one, but it's not enough to just pick one and only focus on that one. You're not going to get anywhere.
yes, I was doing a breakdown of like how my coaching has gone so far. And it's like, well, this is what they came to me with, but this is where we ended up. And these were all the stops we made in between because they're all so essential and they all go together, but they all need time
Mhm.
individually.
Oh my gosh. So that just reminded me of something that a client said to me in a session. We were chatting and they were like, So we were just going about this conversation, and all of a sudden my trauma popped up out of nowhere, and I didn't see that coming. And I was like,
Mhm.
yes, absolutely. So I don't know. This is a side note that you all get to hear. I don't know if we have trauma on our list, but I feel like that's a thing we should talk about sometime because
We've done plenty of that already. So yes, it definitely needs to. We are well versed in trauma
woven into
conversation.
everything, but a lot of people don't realize.
And that's one of the things too, is like trauma does play into personal responsibility, because where is the line between I am triggered and it causes things outside of my control to happen and thoughts outside of my control, to I am absolutely 100% responsible for the way that I respond to those triggers and to those trauma responses.
Yes. That's something that I've like, and I'm about to say this, and it's not to say that I've never done it, but like it's something that I've observed in a couple of friends when they're like, "Oh, well, they should know that this is a big trigger for me." And I'm like, "Yes, that statement is not untrue. They should know that that is a big trigger for you. But also, like, what are you doing about it? Because you're
Mhm.
also aware that it's a big trigger for you. It's
Mhm.
not just their responsibility."
Yes. It's like I have certain behaviors that if my partners were to display them, they would be very triggering for me. And I absolutely have no right to tell them, you can't do this because it's going to make me feel some kind of way. But I do let them know, hey, this is what you can most likely expect from me. And depending on how severe the response is, I may or may not struggle more to keep my emotional response in check. But that doesn't make you wrong.
Right.
That doesn't mean that you can't use your autonomy to act as how you want to act.
Mhm.
But also, I might fall to pieces, just so you know.
We're both aware because awareness is important.
And if I do fall to pieces, that's on me to ask for the help that I need, ask for the support that I need, and to not make it their problem. Like,
And it's also so different. Like if you fall to pieces and then you ask for support, hey, I have fallen apart. Would you be willing to? Could you? This is what I need. Asking for that extra support is also not the same as saying, like, this, I fell apart because you did this, and now you have to fix it.
yeah,
Those are
exactly.
very different.
Yes. And honestly, especially like with the stuff that I deal with in my side of coaching, it's really in how it's framed matters more than just about anything. The words that you use and how you frame it at the end of the day is the thing that makes the difference between doing it in a healthy way and an unhealthy way.
Mhm.
Because, I mean, everything that we're talking about is like normal human experiences, but there's a spectrum of ways to go about it
Yeah.
that makes it healthier versus unhealthy.
Yeah. I I'm not going to go there with that. Yes, I absolutely agree that words matter. And I say that all the time. And I will even, depending on the person that I'm talking to, sometimes I'll be like, is there another way that you could say that?
Mhm,
Like in with a person and in a situation where like I know it's not gonna, it's not a high risk situation.
mhm,
Just, oh, I hear that you said this. I feel like those specific words aren't exactly what you mean. Is there another way that you could say that?
mhm.
I try and do the same thing with myself. Like I'll catch myself, be like, oh, well,
One of the tools that I use a lot is like, is this how you'd say it to a child? Like,
mm,
why do we talk to adults? And I know there's nuance all over the place and unhealthy behaviors all over the place. But by and large, framing it the way that you would healthily frame it with a child is the way to do it with an adult, especially because we're all relearning all of this shit all over again. Explain it like I'm 5 is like the perfect way to handle things.
yeah. I feel like that goes over better when you're talking to somebody who practices like conscious parenting, though.
I mean, but those are the kind of people that like me anyway.
Right, right,
So
right. Those are the people that I like to have in my life.
exactly.
I
Exactly.
feel like that was a conversation you and I had months ago when I was first starting, like thinking about like, oh, I think I want to start dating again. And you were like, what was it? Like, what if you have different parenting styles?
Oh yeah, I remember
I was
that.
like, oh, well, here's the thing. I would not even consider being in a relationship with somebody who like didn't already believe like these things. And so for us to have different parenting styles, they're already going to be an open-minded individual who wants to hear what I have to say and consider the information I'm presenting, where they got it, the impact of it, consider what they already know. And like, because those are the people, those are my people. Like, if we have differing parenting styles and it's very extreme, that also means that they're probably just not even the kind of person I want in my life in general, kids aside.
Mhm. Exactly. And that's like the perfect example of the positive feedback cycle of raising your fucking standards and then finding healthier people and then raising your standards because of those healthier people.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to get my shirt. I wonder if I'll have it and I can wear it next time. For y'all that don't know, Dayana has a Redbubble shop, and she's got all kinds of swag in there now. And I ordered a t-shirt and a sticker for myself today that says, raise your fucking standards.
Because you should. You did.
I did.
Like you
Yeah.
took that and you fucking ran with it.
I was just talking about that this morning and I was like, wow, 6 months ago, I was prepared to be alone, and like not in like a sad, depressed way, like, oh, woe is me, I'm never gonna find anybody, my life is terrible, but just like my standards are really high. Is there anybody out there that can meet these standards? And since January, I've raised them even more.
Right?
And hey, good news, I found somebody who meets my really high fucking standards. So
So amazing. I love it. And I have a front row
out
seat
there
to all of it.
looking.
Yes. And that too is like it all factors into personal responsibility because you took responsibility for like what you want to accept in your life and the kind of people you want to accept and the kind of treatment that you want to accept. And so that like goes into all of the other areas too, but like recognizing that hey, this is what I want, and then behaving and speaking and moving in a way that says this is what I want, you're taking responsibility for the kind of partner that you find
Mhm.
and the kind of relationship that you have because you decided this is what was important to you.
Yes. And I think that also brings up the point of, which can be true in parenting, all relationships. Like the people who say, like, do as I say, not as I do. No, like the biggest impact is like actions absolutely
Mhm.
speak louder than words, right? We hear that all the time. And so like the way I conduct myself, the way I behave, the way I talk to people, the way I handle situations, like if that's, I don't ever want to have higher expectations for someone else than I have for myself. That
Mhm.
is a huge pet peeve of mine.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of how I got into the position that I'm in as the coach that I am and doing the work that I do is because I was doing these things and people were going, "Holy shit, how did you do that? How did you change this?" Because I saw what was happening before and now shit's so radically different. Like, how did you do that? And so even just people are watching and you don't know who you're impacting. You don't know who is learning by your example that you're not even aware of.
Right.
And the more we model personal responsibility, the more other people start using personal responsibility correctly and then sharing it and modeling it for other people. And then eventually we get this great wave effect that actually has real, like global cultural continental change.
Real quick, what kind of fidget are you playing with?
I've got my Crazy Aaron's thinking putty in
Okay,
purple.
I've got these magnetic little beads, and I like I like strung this one into like, I don't know, a bracelet.
I originally had my other one, but it was too clicky, and I figured anybody watching
Can
it
you
would
hear
hate.
mine?
No, I can't hear yours.
Okay, good. Because like it does make a little bit of noise as I move it around. And at first I was like, oh my gosh, I hope she can't hear it.
Mine does little popping bubbles, but my other one is like one of those clicky snakes. Like it
Mhm.
clicks a lot.
Yeah.
And that's the fun of coaching with somebody who also has ADHD.
I know.
Because they're both
Okay,
like,
you brought it up just above the camera. I was like, what is that? Is that a slinky? What is she playing with? I want to show her what I'm playing with.
I keep a whole box of fidgets behind my desk. 'cause
Mine's all in front of me. I've got this one and this one and this one. And I have another rainbow one. Oh, I have 2 more that my daughter has walked off with.
I don't know anything about that. But yeah. It's personal responsibility is like a tricky thing to relearn. And that's why like one of my original slogans was like the shit you should have learned in school. Because can you imagine what life would be like if we had learned all of this the right way the first time?
Right. But instead, what's modeled for us is codependence, which is
Mhm.
like the opposite of personal responsibility.
Yeah, like you did this, you made me feel this way. This is all your fault. And personal responsibility and the shoving off of it feeds so much into autonomy too. Like we don't, in general, in the unhealthy version, we don't leave a lot of room for people to be their authentic selves, to behave in a way that's authentic to them. So like so an example from earlier on in my marriage, and this was actually kind of what spurred me to make real and lasting changes, was my husband has really severe social anxiety, and he needed to go to the DMV to get something, the car re-registered or something like that. Like it had lapsed and he couldn't do it online. And like he wasn't going to go until I could go with him. And so I felt stuck. I don't want to have to pay the price for the car, getting a ticket or anything like that because the registration had lapsed. But also, I don't want to have to be responsible for making sure this gets done. And so that was like when I really first laid it down and I said, you're impeding on my autonomy by refusing to do this unless I go with you. And you're not even asking me to go with you. You're doing this passive aggressive, like not aggressive, but just passive thing of like, oh, we need to go do this. Well, we don't need to do this. This is your car in your name. I literally cannot do this unless you go with me and sign a paper that says I can do this.
Right.
So like, why do you need me there? And why are you refusing to do unless I go with you? So then I was like, I feel like I have no choice. I feel like you are backing me into a corner by not taking responsibility for this because it is your responsibility to make sure this gets done. And you're refusing to do it unless I go with you, but you're also not even asking. You're just like backing me into this corner of, either I have consequences to deal with, like a ticket, or I have to go out of my way to make this trip with you. Because, of course, at the time we lived in a much more rural place. So it wasn't easy.
I'm so curious. How did the story end?
So we had a conversation about it, and I told him basically exactly that. It doesn't feel good to know that you are not going to do this. Like I understand the social anxiety part of it, but also you're an adult and you need to take responsibility for your stuff. And so we had a conversation that ended with him asking, will you please make time to go to the DMV with me so that this can get done? And I said, yes, this time I will, but I'm not always going to do that.
Yes.
And so if you want my help, you need to ask me directly, give me all of the information I need to make an informed decision.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
It was
something that irks me so much is when people assume that like, oh, because she did this thing before or helped me before, or because she likes me and cares about me, she's going to do this thing. I absolutely do not like assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want my help, I want all of the information presented at once in a very clear manner, please. I want to be able to make an informed decision.
Yes, if you message me and ask you, hey, are you busy? You're either A, not going to get an answer, or B, you're going to well, it depends on what you're about to ask me.
Right.
And I used to
want to go out for ice cream? I am not busy.
Right.
Let's go. but
You
that's
want
probably not it.
you want me to go run an errand for you? I might
Mm,
be busy.
you want me to watch your kids for you?
But conversely, so that's a habit that I'm in now is when I'm asking somebody for something, I tell
Mhm,
them, "Hey," and I give them upright, "This is the timeline. This is how fast I need an answer. This is what I need from you. This is what it's going to cost from you.
mhm.
Do I need your car? Whatever." And give them all of the information front loaded. And it
Right.
makes it so much easier and it's so much faster too because you don't have a back and forth of, you
Yes,
know,
front load the information and then end it with the request.
mhm. Yep.
Yes.
Because I mean, how many times have you asked somebody a question and then it's like you're waiting for an answer because you don't know what you're going to do
Right,
next
right.
because it's based on their
Or
answer.
I'm
And
like,
then,
I'm sorry, was that to, like, just inform me of something, or are you asking for my help? I'm not really sure what's happening here. I have a lot of feelings, and I don't know what they are because I don't actually know what the point of this interaction is yet.
yes, like
Yes.
new people in my life get a grace period. But after that, like once you've been through and you know how I operate because I make it very fucking clear for you, I don't give a whole lot more grace than that. Like I give human experience grace, but like I don't stand for this repeated, you know, what are you doing? Are you busy? Like once I'll walk you through the process, but then after that,
Yeah.
you're on your own. Like,
And that's also something that's a lot I know I have said this before, but that's a lot easier to navigate, I think, for myself in new relationships, new people that come into my life. I'm like, great, I have figured out like all of these things that I like. And so, like, I can set the standard moving forward of like, this is how I like to be communicated with. This is, these are the boundaries that I have. And like, this is what I will and will not tolerate. And like, this is how I will communicate with you. But like, people who've been in my life since I was a teenager, it
yeah.
is harder to make those changes and implement that.
Yeah. So, and that's where I like the preface conversations that I talk about that they come in. So I had a friend message me who doesn't really follow me on Facebook, hasn't really been abreast of all the changes that I've made in my
Mhm.
life. And they texted me and I was like, "Hey, just so you know, this is how I do things now. Like I know we've known each other since middle school, but like I've changed the way that I operate. So I no longer accept, are you busy? Or are you free or whatever it is, like this is how I do things now." And I walk them through the whole process and I explain why too. Like that's part of it that is emotional labor that I choose to take on that I don't expect that everybody will, but I explain why because I also want them to do the same thing in their life. I want them to have the confidence to be able to say the exact same thing to their
Mhm.
mother-in-law, their sister, their bestie.
You have raised your standards and you want to model for other people how to do it in their lives.
Exactly, exactly. And it's funny you talk about the new relationship thing. I met somebody and um like in our first conversations, like we had all of this. Like the list of things that we talked about was so thorough and she was like, "I have literally never experienced anything like this before, but within the first 3 days, we knew long term whether or not we would be compatible." Like, it didn't matter what kind of connection it was or what
Right,
the relationship looked like,
right.
but we knew that it was a good fit. She's like, "I've literally never answered so many questions from one person ever in my life." And I was like, "Yes, but now I know how you work. I know what you think. I know what you feel in general terms. Obviously,
Yeah, yeah.
this is not all encompassing, but like now I know how to approach you when something comes up that hurts my feelings. Now I know how you want to communicate if you're upset. Now I know if you say this, then it means that I've done something to hurt you and I know how to proceed to repair it." And so I was like, "Yes, it's a lot up front, but it makes everything so much easier." I
Yeah,
will take
and
that.
it's good to address a lot of these types of things when there's not yet emotions involved in the situation.
Yes. Yes. It's like I like to be as abrasive and off-putting as possible because then I know, like, if you've made it past that,
Yes.
you're likely more compatible when it comes to where your standards are.
Yeah.
And to me, that's really important because I've always had a desire for higher standards than I actually had. And I've spent a lot of time settling for less, but that's not how I want to spend my energy anymore. I don't want to continue to be available to people who are just going to use me and abuse me. And if you can't handle that kind of questioning in the first 36 hours, then that tells me a lot about how I want to keep you in my life, like what placement in my proximity that I want to keep you. Because it's not saying that, nobody with standards lower than mine can be in my circle, but I'm not going to invest all of my time and energy there. That's a choice that I'm going to make. I'm going to save that for people who are on the same level or working towards the same level that I'm at.
I wouldn't say that I'm abrasive with it. I would say that I'm very direct. And
Mhm.
people have so little experience with people being direct that they perceive it as me being abrasive, but that's not actually what's happening.
That could be true. I will say I tend to be
And again, this
more
is for me. I'm not saying
right.
for you.
I do tend to be much more abrasive with men on purpose because I want men who are going to be my allies, not men who are going to try and put me in my place. And if they think that they have to put me in my place right off the
Mhm.
bat, then it's not going to work. But if they're like, okay, cool, like I totally respect that, then they can pass on to the next level and like see how they handle being confronted with some of the realities of how their social conditioning shaped the way they relate to other people.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say I'm unapologetically direct.
I like that.
So,
Maybe it's more accurate, but I still like the word abrasive. I think it comes from like I was never allowed to be abrasive before. Like
mm.
this is the first
Oh,
time in my life that I can
okay.
be.
Okay. I was told as a child and teenager that I was very abrasive. And so now I don't want to be abrasive because I spent so much time doing that, but I also want to be very clear and direct.
Mhm.
And I'm not going to mince words about it.
Nope, I was never allowed to say or do anything that like could potentially hurt anybody else's feelings. Their feelings always had to come first. And that's a large part of the work that I do. I talking with our mutual coach, I was like, I don't think that I've ever had a single person who didn't have a huge people pleasing element to their struggles and like being told how they have to behave and how they have to present and what parts of them were and were not acceptable. And now trying to undo that and be their authentic version, it's a lot harder to work through. You know that. Recovering people pleaser in the house. Times two.
Hard work. It's really hard work. Okay, look at us. It's 1:39. Well, y'all don't know what time it is. We've been doing this for 39 minutes.
Yay.
We wanted to keep it between 40 and 45.
Yes.
Do you have anything else that you want to add?
The biggest takeaway I would say is like start practicing the mantra that other people's feelings are not my responsibility.
Mhm.
Their feelings are not your responsibility.
Yes.
Doesn't mean you have to be an asshole,
Mhm.
but also don't take on shit that's not yours.
But also, please take on the shit that is yours. Own your
Yes.
shit. Own your shit.
Yes.
I will say it again. When people take responsibility for their actions, their words, whatever it is, I have so much more respect for them. I do not think less of you when you say, I fucked up.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Cool. Hey, we did it.
Unless it's like the 75th time you fucked up with this exact thing, in which case,
Okay.
get your shit together.
Okay, but like side note, so I had a partner with a really, really, really steep learning curve when it came to being in a healthy relationship.
Okay.
And actually, you were one of the people, but several people were like, why are you still in a relationship with this person? If this is your experience of it, why? And without hesitation, it's because they kept trying. They kept working towards
Right.
improvements.
Yes.
It was a lot of fucking mistakes, but it was a new fucking mistake almost every time.
See though, like I'm talking like you keep doing the exact same thing
Right.
over and over. I don't still respect you when you come and say I have fucked up because I did this thing. The same thing
Well,
we talked about last week in the same way.
right. And I think that's another element to like this whole learning curve with all of this stuff is that, when is it something different? Because if you're in a completely different situation, but you don't know how to suss this stuff out, you may not be able to tell, is this the same thing? Does this, like, underneath, is the foundational concept the same, or is it a completely different concept? But maybe it was, over finances, and last one was over finances too. So it looks like it's the same mistake, but it's actually a completely different one. So
Yeah.
maybe we can add that to the list of like that kind of discernment. So
Right. Awesome. Well, thanks for your time.
yeah,
You know what would be so fun is if one day we could do this like in the same room.
I know. Well, I mean, yeah, we could probably make that happen. You are going to be close by, not too
I'm going to
long
be
from now.
Yeah. How far are you from DC?
Like 40 minutes to an hour, depending on traffic.
Oh yeah.
That's one of the things that I'm very upfront about is that I don't drive very far. I have a very limited thing. But for you,
I was just gonna say, if I come to DC, will you drive for me?
or I could take the train. But yes, for you, I would make that trip as long as you could guarantee me a place that I wasn't gonna have to struggle to park, because that overwhelms me like nothing else.
Okay.
Like, I'll pay for parking in a hotel parking lot, but please don't make me find a side street to parallel park.
Okay. Things that people don't care about that we're talking about now. So,
Right.
okay.
So, alrighty. Well, we will do this again next week.
Okay, bye.
Bye.